Listen, why don't we go in the back and shag?
What?
I've been frozen for 30 years. I gotta see if my bits and pieces are still working.
Austin Powers walks into a room full of people. He's wearing a ruffled shirt, a velvet suit, and teeth that look like they lost a fight with a brick wall. He opens his mouth and the first thing out of it is a joke about shagging. He hasn't read the room. He hasn't tried to read the room. And the room doesn't factor into his thinking at all. And every single person in that room responds to him like he's the most compelling man they've ever encountered.
Do I make you horny, baby? Do I? Do I make you randy? Yeah.
That's the thing that shouldn't work, yet it's the thing that does. Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery came out in May of 1997. Mike Myers had been working on the character for years before that. It started as a sketch concept.
That's Dr. Evil's cat.
How can you tell?
I never forget a pussy. Cat.
A parody of 1960s spy films, the kind of thing that made sense as a 5-minute bit and was much harder to justify as a feature film. The studio had real doubts about it. The test screenings were not great. The trailers didn't set the world on fire. By every conventional metric, this was a movie that was probably going to come out, do modest numbers, and disappear quietly.
I've lost my mojo!
Yet it came out, it did modest numbers, and then something happened on home video that almost never happens. People started watching it, then rewatching it, then quoting it, then eventually buying the DVD specifically to make their friends watch it. Within a year, it had become something the theatrical release numbers never predicted, an actual phenomenon. The sequel made $225 million. The third film made nearly $300 million.
Who does number 2 work for?
That's right, buddy. You show that turd who's boss.
The franchise became one of the most profitable comedy properties of the late 90s and early 2000s, built entirely around a character who, if you try to explain him to someone who'd never seen the films, should have been unwatchable. That's the part worth looking at, not the success, the gap between what Austin Powers is on paper and what he does in practice. Austin Powers is not meant to be cool.
I'm gonna have a lump there, you idiot. Who throws a shoe? Honestly. You fight like a woman.
The clothes are wrong, the hair is wrong, the teeth are so wrong they become their own recurring bit. He talks about sex constantly in the least smooth way imaginable, using vocabulary that would have been dated in 1969, let alone 1997. He dances like he's alone in a kitchen. He reacts to everything with an enthusiasm that reads less like confidence and more like a golden retriever that hasn't been outside in 3 days. In the grammar of how movie characters usually work, all of that should carry consequences. Think about how comedic characters who are supposed to be embarrassing usually function. They get shut down, they get rejected, and the world around them registers the gap between their self-image and reality, and the humor comes from watching the gap get exposed over and over. The character is the butt of the joke, because the movie is willing to confirm repeatedly that their delusion is a delusion. Austin is objectively not a good spy by any standard the film establishes. He gets confused by basic technology, he misses obvious threats, he approaches every mission with a level of tactical preparation that suggests he hasn't thought about it all beyond deciding to show up.
Don't you remember the Crimbo Din Din we had with the grotty Scotch bin?
Oh, the one that was all 6s and 7s.
Yeah.
He's also been frozen since 1967 and thawed out in 1997, which means he has genuinely no idea how the world works anymore. He's a man completely out of his depth in a world that has moved 30 years past him, operating on instincts that were questionable to begin with. Here's the first thing the film does that it shouldn't. It never makes Austin pay. Not in any sustained way, not in the way that actually registers as consequence. When Austin misses something obvious, the film moves past it. When Austin says something that should land him in serious trouble, the scene ends before the trouble arrives. When his plan makes no sense, it works anyway, or the film cuts away at exactly the moment it would need to show it not working. Compare that to basically any other comedic character built on the same archetype: the bumbling spy, the out-of-his-depth hero, the man who thinks he's far more capable than he is. That character usually gets humiliated at regular intervals as part of how the comedy works. The humiliation is the confirmation. The audience needs the film to acknowledge the gap between the character's self-image and reality. Austin Powers almost never gets that humiliation. Basil Exposition doesn't sit Austin down and tell him he's a disaster. The women in the film don't consistently reject his advances in ways that stick. Dr. Evil doesn't win encounters with Austin because Austin is clearly over his head. The film is not interested in confirming that Austin is as ridiculous as he looks. It's interested in something else entirely. Every time a scene sets up the conditions for Austin to fail, the film either bails on the consequence or transforms it into something else. The rejection doesn't land, the exposure doesn't follow through, and the scene moves on before the punishment can arrive. That's not accidental. That's a consistent structural choice being made across the entire film. And then there's everyone else. The most revealing thing about the Austin Powers film isn't Austin himself, it's how every character around him behaves. Vanessa is a professional, she's competent, she's trained, and she clearly finds Austin immediately and genuinely irritating. She establishes herself as someone who has a real reaction to who Austin is and what he represents. And then she falls for him, not despite who he is. The film doesn't frame it as a case of seeing past the surface to something better underneath. She falls for him as he is, teeth and all, velvet suit and all, repeated groaning puns and all. The film never asks Austin to change to earn her. It asks Vanessa to adjust to him. Look at the henchmen. Dr. Evil's organization is on paper a serious threat. These are people who operate globally, who have real resources, who are positioned as a genuine danger. They encounter Austin repeatedly. They lose to Austin repeatedly, not because Austin outsmarts them or outfights them or does something tactically impressive, but because the film needs them to lose, and they do. Look at Dr. Evil himself. Mike Myers playing both roles is part of the film's whole thing, and Dr. Evil is genuinely funny in his own right. But notice how his scenes are structured around Austin. He's not winning. He's not even really competing. He's operating in a world where Austin is going to come out on top regardless of what Dr. Evil actually does. And the scenes between them are built to confirm that before they've even started. So here's what's actually happening. The humor in Austin Powers is almost never Austin himself. A joke doesn't land because Austin does something funny. Austin delivers a line that should die in the room, yet the room doesn't let it die. That's the joke. Austin makes a move that should fall, yet it doesn't fall. That's the joke. The comedy lives entirely in the gap, the space between the Austin the audience can see and the Austin the film keeps insisting exists. Every single laugh in this movie is generated in that space, not from Austin's behavior alone, but from the contrast between his behavior and the world's refusal to register it accurately, which is why the film works on repeat viewings in a way that straight parody usually doesn't. Straight parody is about recognizing the reference. Once you've recognized it, the joke is done. The Austin Powers mechanism doesn't depend on the reference recognition. It depends on watching the gap, and the gap is just as visible and just as funny the fifth time through as the first. The Austin Powers film works because it committed completely to one rule and never broke it. Austin believes he's a brilliant, irresistible, intentionally celebrated super spy, and the film decided that Austin's belief is the operative reality, not the thing that the audience can see. Every scene is built to enforce that decision, and somehow across 90 minutes of ruffled shirts and groaning puns, it holds together completely.